Hi, my name is Gretchen Reyes. Today I'll be presenting to you figures from McCullough and Knowles. I think these figures pair quite nicely with each other, and I think you'll agree with me once we review them. We'll be looking at REM sleep today, so stay tuned. Perfect. So now we have McCullough. McCullough's hypothesis was that if alcohol was consumed consecutively, it would have a cumulative impact on sleep. And in order to observe this, McCullough gathered 30 participants, 15 men and 15 women. He gave them a mixer and a mixer alcohol, and then compared how their sleep performed under both beverages by monitoring their brain waves for 8 hours. And so we're going to look at the data that was collected through this experiment. We can see here that we are observing the percentage of REM sleep of total sleep time. So N1, N2, N3 means night 1, night 2, night 3. This is a 3-day experiment. And so we start off with looking at N1. You can see there isn't a huge margin. It's not immediately obvious that there is a decrease in REM sleep with alcohol. And that stays true for the rest of the nights. You can see for N2, there is a small margin, but it's not blatantly obvious. And we can conclude from that alcohol doesn't have a dangerously alarming effect on the percentage of REM sleep you're going to get. But McCullough did conclude differently from the characterization of Figure 2e's data. So if we look at the conclusion that is briefly summarized right here for us, it says alcohol increases slow wave sleep. I did review the graph that showed for slow wave sleep, and I do agree that there was an increase in slow wave sleep. This was in Figure 2b, but for the Figure 2e that talked about REM sleep, I don't think that there is like an absolute conclusion that REM sleep will always decrease if you drink alcohol. And so McCullough is not necessarily the most concrete conclusion we can really gather for how alcohol affects sleep in general, because I don't think the REM sleep example really showed that much of a difference. And so with that, we can move on to Knowles. So Knowles is similar. Knowles is going to be talking about REM sleep as well. And so their hypothesis was that if alcohol ethanol was consumed, it would reduce the time of sleep spent in the REM state. And so the methods are kind of silly here. They had one of the researchers drink various amounts of alcohol, and then there was like a water orange solution, which acts as the mixer kind of. And then their BAC level was tracked alongside sleep onset. And so we're going to look at Table 1, which hosts all the results. It kind of looks alarming, but we're just going to pick a few days and observe them. So let's start off with July 7th. July 7th, the alcohol was 3.3 ounces, and so they started drinking 9:20, and their BAC level was 0.04 at 1 a.m. And so they fell asleep 7 minutes later. You can see from the sleep onset. That's only 7 minutes later. And then a day like July 16th, which was the most that subject had drinking so far in the study, was 6 ounces. At 9:55 p.m., so only about like 25 or 35 minutes later, their BAC level was 0.15. That is very high. That is higher than the legal amount, which is 0.08. And so if we look at the BAC level and the time it was taken, so 12:19, the subject fell asleep about 5 minutes later, which is a shorter time than the smallest amount, which was 7 minutes. And so there's not really a patterned noticeable rhythm to how alcohol will affect sleep. It's really not like logarithmic or anything, because if you look at another date, for example, let's look at July 11th. July 11th, 3.5 ounces, relatively small. It's not that much greater than the smallest amount. 0.06 BAC level at 12:20 a.m. The subject fell asleep about 35 minutes later. And then also for a day like July 20th, 6 ounces again, 0.10, so the BAC level is not the same as the night before. There's not a lot of consistency. That could have something to do with the model of the data or the way that they approach this method. So 12:30, the BAC level, and then they fell asleep about 36 minutes later. So as you can see, there's not really a huge pattern. And so table 1 shows that there's not a patterned or noticeable difference in sleep onset according to BAC level, and the conclusion is more compatible with this table than it was in McCullough. The conclusion holds that total REM sleep is not significantly reduced by the consumption of alcohol. Thank you so much for listening.